Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the season premiere of Westworld. Great season premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, I think this is our biggest time skip so far in the series, because season 1 to season 2 is pretty immediate, and season 2 to 3 was like a little more than 3 months, I think, basically. So we saw basically by when Bernard returns at the post-credit scene that he's covered in dust. So it was a while. Wasn't expecting 8 years though. I guess I don't know how long I really expected, but that's really interesting to know he was gone that long. And it's so weird because it's like, right, where we left off in season 3, the entire world was on fire, and to see the world kind of back to being somewhat normal, it's almost like, right, it almost feels like none of that happened, and it did, but like, what was the longing impact? I mean, as Maeve said to Caleb, you can be whoever you want to be. So we see different lives. Well, let's focus on Dolores at first, because we see that she's Christina now, and you're like, right, so who's writing your story this time? Or do you actually get a fresh start? I mean, we know there's at least 2 other Doloreses that were out there. There was, not Jennifer, jeez. I was about to say Jennifer Hill, that's the voice actress. Charlotte, Dolores, and then there was the other one that Bernard met. I want to say that was in the season finale, or maybe it was the second to last episode. Either way, there's at least 2 Doloreses that were like running around. But this is a new person, and it's like, right, is she in a simulation? Well, because that Dolores's core existed. It's just like she doesn't have any memories. So I wonder, did they upload her somewhere, or maybe just implanted her in a new host and give her a new life? Was that Maeve and Caleb who did that? Because she probably has zero. Because it would make sense for her not to know what she really is. Because so it's almost like a reboot. It's almost like Dolores got rebooted, and now she's kind of almost back to being who she was at the very beginning of the series, just different. She gets to live a new life, no longer being on someone else's script. Or maybe the irony is that she is back on someone else's script. But I think it's interesting because she herself is a video game writer. So that's interesting. Now she writes scripts, and the one she was working on in this episode was a more modernized, non-Western version of her own story. Of like, a young teen, older teen looking after her father, wanting adventure, kind of wanting a bigger role. And I think that's so interesting because she talks about the fact is that she writes NPCs. And the guy she was on a date with was like, oh, what's that? Like, oh, they're cannon fodder or whatever. I'm like, that's so interesting, because I guess that shows you the different perspective on even people who play video games of just kind of like NPCs. Because I've come to appreciate NPCs so much more because, once again, maybe it's a blessing, maybe it's a curse, but because of Falcom and the Trails of Cold Steel games, those games made me talk to literally every NPC. To be fair, there's so much written dialogue in those games, you might as well take advantage of it. Like, I mean, across all of Cold Steel, across all of the Trails/Kaseki games. So, I mean, obviously, like, long amounts of, like, dialogue are prevalent in JRPGs, because I feel like those are the games that really, I mean, not just damn RPGs in general, but I think JRPGs really lean into, like, fleshing out NPCs, especially the Trails games, but regardless. I thought that was kind of interesting, because for her, which I find funny, because she spends so much time writing NPCs, because that's kind of the role Dolores kind of was, but then she became so much more. She wanted a bigger life, a bigger destiny, and she kind of got it. Now she's back to that smaller role again, writing small roles. I think the layers upon layers of that's so interesting, especially when her friend was like, oh, which shoe should I pick, the white or the black? And she's like, oh, both. I'm like, she's like, both look nice, and you're like, oh, look at you being cheeky, like, oh, good, bad, which one is it? She ended up picking the white shoes, and it's like, right, she kind of always, despite everything, despite the, she's always been that back and forth, but maybe it's supposed to signify this time around she's purely wearing the white hat, maybe, because her friend ended up wearing the white shoes, because she told her to. So I'm wondering, is that supposed to imply like Dolores' story this season? So her boss is the actor who plays Enzo in the Vampire Diaries, but also I want to say probably most recently was like Designated Survivor. I know he was in that. either way, her boss doesn't want her writing like these small like stories. It's like, oh, we want blood, we want this, we want violence. It's like, yeah, that story you wrote when that person's world fell apart. What happened? And then Christina's like, everyone kind of died. He's like, yeah, that's what happens. It's like, which is kind of sad because it's like, right, these repeating themes because like Westworld. Lot of terrible. I mean, it's also heartbreaking because like we know what was done to her during Westworld, like what people did to her, what a lot of people did. In particular, William. What was William's thing? Going there and breaking shit. You know, so it's like there's layers to that her boss wants her to write that story, but she wants to write something else. So she keeps getting called by a dude named, we later on find out it's named Peter. The moment I heard his voice, I was like, is that Aaron Stanford? Totally is. Best thing I know him for, he was Cole in 12 Monkeys. And so I guess I am getting pretty good at picking up voices. Something else recently made me go like, oh, I guess I can't believe I didn't notice this particular actor's voice. But whatever the case may be. To be fair, that actor, I wasn't familiar with everything that she had done, and I'd only had like one scene with her. But it was still like, man, whatever the case may be, I think that was just interesting. HBO wise, I think interesting enough, he was what was his character's name? I don't remember, but he was in Perry Mason on so. I just thought that was interesting. But the moment he was like, right, you're doing this to me, you're writing my story, and I'm like, okay. So I'm assuming this is tying in with the opening, which also had another familiar actor. Like, I think he's known for something else, but obviously most recently I know him as T-Lock from Big Sky. That guy, like, he's part of a cartel, and William comes to visit her, which we know that's not William. We still never got a definitive answer on, like, you'd assume Dolores Charlotte copied herself. So, like, or maybe not, because some hosts show up later on and they don't know what they are. So either Dolores Charlotte like made them also Dolores's, but just didn't tell them, or just maybe because they were familiar faces. So the question then, because she probably just because their cores are gone, so they'd have to be copies of herself, and she just probably like programmed to be something else. That's what I would assume, because like no other cores exist. Not unless she's making them. We know she's making bodies, obviously, but it's like, can she make cores too? Like the host units? I don't know. Because you'd assume the William we know it's not the real William. We know the real William's dead, so this William has to be a Dolores William, right? I don't know. But that whole thing about like they want that place, and whatever it is that they have, it's like, right, we'll give you the substantial amount of money. If you don't do what we want, we'll get it for free tomorrow. And the guy didn't want to. And now we have those whole flies, which they're in the intro too. So I'm assuming they're a new, like, because it seems like that's going to be a main thing. Because I haven't seen the full trailer. I've seen promo and I've seen the teaser. I've seen more recent promo, but I haven't seen the full-blown trailer. And it's been a while since I saw the teaser. But it seems like these flies are going to be a major thing. And I guess they're a new programmable thing that allows you to control humans. Kind of like how like hosts can be kind of overwritten, kind of made to do what you want them to do. Maybe it's almost supposed to be like a more smaller version of what Maeve can do. Maybe it's supposed to be indicative of that to some extent. So maybe someone's found a way to kind of replicate her powers and in a more outside of Maeve and made it controllable, because those flies happen. The guy passes out, he wakes up, and then he murders everyone, and he gives William exactly what he wants. It's like, okay, now you're done. You can end all of this, and the guy kills himself. So I think it goes along with this Peter guy, because Christina thinks she's just writing scripts to write scripts. In actuality, I don't think she's not purposely doing it. I think the company she's working for is using those scripts and testing them out on real people, which is jacked up. I guess it's like, right, Westworld isn't a thing anymore, so now it's being implemented in the world. Like, obviously the whole thing with Rehoboam last season was about heading everyone towards a direction of like, okay, let's make humanity better. Let's change humanity for the better. So what if we're down that route again? I don't know. Because like it seems like this is all Charlotte's deal, and I don't know. We never found out. She explained to Dolores as like, "Oh, I have my own plans." We have no idea what the hell that means. I mean, she's kind of definitely in a very scorched earth type of mood. She was then, but we know that was all Sirach's deal. Which We don't know for sure that he's dead. He sure as hell got shot, but last time we saw him in the end of season 3, he was still alive, so there's always a possibility. Because Caleb and Maeve, we saw in some of Maeve's memories, they blew something up. We know Rehoboam was like destroyed at the end of the season, but they went to blow something up. Either someone tried to turn it back on, or that was Solomon that it was just quick flashes. That might have been Solomon they went to destroy to make sure, like, right, that's taken care of. Like, either they're trying to destroy the shell so that no one, and even if someone tries to recreate it, it's like it would take them years upon years to get to rebuild it again. Or because Solomon is still there, so it probably made sense, like, right, we don't want to take the chance someone reboots it and uses it to kind of pick up, so probably destroying the other one. And at first everyone was like, wait, did Caleb die because he was badly wounded? And you're like, then you start getting to that territory. It's like, well, you can never take, I've said this in my my nerd mode. It's like, you can't take anything in this show for fact because you don't know who's real, who's a host. I mean, once again, who cares? The line's so blurred at this point in time. But it's like, oh, who's to say Caleb didn't die? Because it's like, well, is his daughter his biological daughter? Doesn't matter. It only matters in the conversation of, if it's not his biological daughter, like, say, like, him and his wife, it's like, oh, like, she already had Frankie, and then her and Caleb, so Caleb's more of a stepdad than, but from a, like, biological standpoint, he's the stepdad and not the biological father. Because that can get in that territory. I mean, granted, it's been 8 years, because you're always waiting for your Shyamalan twist with this, So I'm waiting, trying to see, like, okay, so where things could potentially go on that front, but it's like, I'm wondering, because Maeve doesn't have access to make other, Maeve doesn't have the means to make hosts, so she wouldn't have been able to get Caleb one either way, so he had to just be okay, maybe. But like I said, I think it's such an interesting thing that the world has continued on the way it has. Circling back, let me finish up everything with Christina. I think it's so interesting that she wants to write a story. And she's at the end, she was talking about how she wanted there to be a happy ending because after her date and then the whole thing with Peter, him attacking her, and then someone defending her, and I was like, who is that? And I was like, that's not. It crossed my mind. I was like, Cause at first I was like, is that going to be Caleb or something? But then the way the hair was in the shadows, I was like, nah. I was like, nah, that can't be. And lo and behold, we find out it's fucking Teddy. And you're like, whoa. Like, do correct me if I'm wrong, because I binged season 1 and season 2 quite a bit before season 3 came out. So obviously it's been like over 2 years since I've seen season 1 and season 2. Didn't Teddy go through to that other world? Well, we know that Bernard went through, so who's to say he came back alone? So, but Teddy's defending, so he must know and remember who she is, and so maybe the entire time, I mean, that's always been like Teddy's role, so maybe that, but maybe it's not even just like, oh, I'm casting this role, it's like, this is a role I've cast for myself, I'm going to watch over you, it's like, right, he probably like ran into her before and she didn't recognize him, and it's like, right, but he wanted to make sure she was okay, like, after everything she did, all she sacrificed, good and bad, she deserves a happy life, and he just wants to make sure she still has it. I don't know. Well, because Bernard even admitted that he misjudged Dolores, so maybe he had some influence on this. I don't know. Because sadly, Peter ended up killing himself because he was like, right, like this story that you wrote. Because the question is, which story did she write? Is it the one that guy said, like, oh, the guy who lost everything and did some stuff? Because he was like, Peter was like, I didn't do that stuff, because he talked about he lost his child, his wife, his job, everything. So that particular, the fact is they referenced that story in particular, I'm assuming, because I'm sure the character's name isn't Peter in the game, but that storyline's been implemented in his life and he's been forced to act it out. They might have all just been test subjects for these flies or who knows. So that's all really interesting. I think it's so fascinating how the show can structure itself like that, where it's like, right, you won't catch up with every character immediately. You'll only like find out what's up with everyone. Like the next episode, we'll probably find out like what's happened to Bernard and like, we know he was gone for those 8 years, but like, last time when he went to sleep, Stubbs was in the tub bleeding. So we don't know like whatever happened. Because all we saw, because I thought I remembered like Bernard waking up and be like, oh, Stubbs, you're gone. But no, Bernard just wakes up. That's the end of the episode. So we have no idea of like, the fact that Stubbs can't have been there, or maybe he finally like killed over after all that time. Who knows? He just, I guess, no one was looking for Bernard, so just left him there. I mean, obviously never checked back in on him because the hotel room is covered in dust. I guess Stubbs is like, well, I've served my purpose, and maybe he finally decided to go live his life instead of, because the plan was always like, hey, protect Bernard. After I'm done, he can kill himself, but Bernard kind of rewrote things. So we'll see. I think episode 2, just assuming, might kind of tackle some of that. But in this post-war world, because at the very least, it's the anniversary, the 7-year anniversary of the riots and the war and everything coming crashing down. So now the conversation has been now like, okay, was it even really worth it? It's like, right, the machines didn't tell us who we could be. The machines just told us who we really were. And that guy, and Caleb's almost like, wait, you're trying to almost say, like, it wasn't worth it? Like, we get to make our own choices. But he's like, yeah, but was it really any different under that machine? It's just like, right. Because now it seems like they've kind of moved away, at least from some of the machinery. Because he's like, yeah, what normally would be machine work is now us working. It would usually be the machines working through the holidays, but most of them are gone now. So I guess it's like, yeah, I guess after finding out, like, a machine determined so much of your life, people got I'm sure there's people who've risen up in that time frame who've been super anti-tech. You'd have to be. It would create something in you to be like, nah, screw that, But at least the machinery isn't what it was before. Obviously, you still use cars and just technology on a regular basis. It's not like that's completely gone. But to be fair, most of that is based on, I'm only coming to that conjecture based on what we see with Dolores. Once again, we don't know if that's a simulation like Sirach had Maven one last season. We don't know if it's kind of a similar thing in that regard or not. But Caleb, at the very least, is playing the role of a father, but, that PTSD is still there. He is, because even she's getting on, his wife is getting on him. It's like, right, you're now your proclivities have kind of come to our daughter. Like, now she's all about sugar and violence. It's like, right. Which was one of the things about Caleb. It's like, oh, he's prone to always kind of respond with things with violence. But the problem is, like, he's kind of paranoid about things, and his wife is mad because it's like, now you're passing that on to our child. It's like, right, war is over. You don't need to jump. You don't always have to be ready. Everything's okay. Everything's good. Because we don't, like, it's been an anniversary, so we don't know if I guess everything got resolved in, like, that time frame afterwards. So I wonder, is the anniversary the start of the war and the riots, or was it the end of it? That's I think a very important distinction. But it seemed, it's that thing of like, oh, Caleb seems paranoid. It's like, yeah, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. Because at the same time, Maeve found out, she's been living her life just kind of unsecluded. Because you're like, right, you would have thought she would have tried and leave by now, try to go back to where. But I guess it's like, right, we don't know if she went into hiding, I guess, because she knew, like, right, there's always a chance that William could, like, they could always find. Once again, I don't know if they know about, they're not aware of Charlotte, I don't think. I mean, I don't know. They're aware of William, but they're probably thinking this is William. They don't, because he only talked his plans with Bernard about, like, and Stubbs about he was going to wipe out all the hosts. So I don't know if that's, like, whether Maeve, it's like, oh, he's coming after me because he wants my access to that world. And I'm assuming at the end of the day, that's what Charlotte wants. She has her own plans for it, I guess, with all the hosts that we saw her creating at the end of season 3. Potentially. But yeah, she gets found out. How very Dexter-like, too. Obviously, with the new blood and everything. It's like, oh yeah, it's been like over 10 years, and lo and behold, here you are trying to live it. I mean, to be fair, Maeve kind of had a secluded life, but I guess Caleb and Maeve would kind of be the very Dexter Morgan-esque element to it all. Them kind of reinventing themselves. Because I don't know how much his wife knows about what Roach, because she knows he was a part of the war, but I don't know if she knows, like, because he didn't change his name or anything, so he's still Caleb. So I'm like, does she know, or does she have some vague notion of what's going on? I'm assuming he probably told her everything, but you never know. But Maeve took care of everyone that rolled up at her place, and then ended up tracking down Caleb because she found out, once again, William's behind all this, so. And it's kind of interesting that the shoe's on the other foot, where it's like, Caleb's like, right, if something had happened to my daughter, you wouldn't know, you couldn't understand, like, but she's like, yes, I would understand what it would do to you to lose your daughter. So, but I'm gonna make sure nothing happens. But Caleb decides, like, no, this fight, because his wife is under the belief, like, you're just looking for a fight, you miss it, and he's like, no, I don't. Kind of, I'm not even sure if Caleb really 100% believes that or really knows the answer to that, but when it's all said and done, he's going off to do this because it's like, in this once and for all, so his family doesn't get dragged into it. He's like, I'm doing this for you, I'm doing this for Frankie. Caleb's like, right, would you, like, not get involved if this was your situation? And she's like, no, I'd come along too. And then she turned around, but muttered, like, kind of whispers to herself, I'd regret it, though, so, because who knows what's going to happen while he's gone. I do love that, I believe it's Manny, the actor who plays Rio in Good Girl. I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, that was him. He's one of the people Caleb's got guarding his place. So he's definitely kept in contact with, like, any crews or whatever to kind of, like, let's go to war whenever we need to, or I need protection for my family. Because they did find Caleb, but that's the big question. Why, after all these years, why all this time? I guess it's like, right, everything's kind of fallen into place and they need to remove him from the equation because it's like, right, you and Maeve could be an issue. You're both leaders in this revolution. It's kind of Caleb, but I think it's also like, right, Maeve and him together kind of represent that leader of this revolution to this new world, and it's like, need to kind of knock out the old hierarchy to bring this world to be whatever it is that Charlotte wants it to be. And once again, like I said, whether or not Sirach is still around. I mean, I think that man is probably broken down a lot after everything that went down last season, but once again, a lot can change in 8 years. So, a very, very interesting start to the season. Like always, Westworld giving you all the questions of what the hell is going on. So, we'll ultimately have to wait and see where this season takes us. Like I said, I have no idea what to fully expect because I'm kind of glad not going into the season having no, like, real, like, even notions of what to even slightly expect. So, I'm very, very excited to see what happens next. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.